This is the Bevo Buckets podcast on the Burn Orange Sports Network. I'm Will Iger here with Ryan Hopper and Seth Berger. And every Tuesday, we're here to talk Texas hoops and some other of the biggest college basketball storylines in the country and in the SEC. We'll do that from around 30 minutes to an hour. And guys, first and foremost, how we doing on this Tuesday here in Austin, Texas? Joe Buck came to speak today. That was pretty cool. Great little lecture at the Moody College of Communication. No complaints. No complaints there.
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Michael Butterworth. I'm kind of chilling in his domain right now, if I'm being honest. The foxhole in here, the Center for Sports Media and Communication. Happy I can camp out here while I still be on campus. And he'll never see this, at least this podcast. But thank you, Joe, if you somehow watch this, for stepping on the phone with me for 20 minutes on Wednesday. So that was awesome.
Yeah, great experience. Nice to listen to him. Some good insight. It's nice to hear somebody you're only used to seeing on TV in person, add a little bit more personality than just a typical play-by-play call. Good experience. But you know who's not doing well? The Horns. They are
Yeah.
scuffling. They are falling apart at the wrong time. Do we want to start with the Arkansas game earlier in the week? Does
Seth,
that
I'll just make a quick joke though, as Joe Buck may have said years ago, that was a disgusting act by Rodney Terry. Just like, and by the way, guys, last bit on Buck, he really talks like that. Like he came into the room like in this like pre-meet thing that some of us had upstairs. And he was like, "Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I was late from the airport." And I was like, he really talks like that. Unbelievable. So sorry to ruin
well,
this.
Seth, you took the words right out of my mouth. I'd love to talk Joe Buck for the next 30 minutes to an hour, but unfortunately, we're gonna have to talk Texas hoops and start with the game last Wednesday night in Fayetteville against Arkansas. Another slow start for Texas ends up biting them in the butt. Texas lost 86 to 81. They did force overtime and came roaring back in the second half. They're down 12 points at the end of the first half. And Trey Johnson hit a key layup for Texas to take the lead only by one with a little over a minute left in the game. It was Texas' first lead since 7-6 with around 17 minutes left in the first half. But somehow, some way, his efforts, his 39 points were not enough for Texas to get the W. Guys, very proud of the team's effort on Wednesday night, even though they came up short. That being said, I do think it was a very winnable game. What are our thoughts on the performance against Arkansas?
like you're missing a Duthiero if you're Arkansas? Obviously, Boogie Flan's out for the year. And quite honestly, when you look at the larger picture, you needed that win. And I will get into the Georgia game, but now knowing that they lost to Georgia, it was especially important. You've had a lot of games down the stretch that were winnable that you haven't been able to get it done in. Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Arkansas the second time. South Carolina, the team you should have beat, you were never even in the game. And
Hmm.
you look at these games now at the end here, you couldn't get one of those, and now we're gonna get into it later, but you're on the wrong side of the bubble now. And so Trey Johnson with an absolutely heroic effort, but it's just not enough. We need other people stepping up. You can't just have one guy going out there, and he almost did it, which is insane, incredibly impressive. But he goes for 39 and just not enough. Needed more offensive. You have Kaluma, 4 of 14 from the field. Tremont Mark, 1 of 8 from the field. Jordan Pope, 2 of 7 from the field. Somebody else has to step up besides Trey Johnson. You can't just be going to one guy. Otherwise, it's impossible to win, especially in the SEC and on the road.
And I would echo a lot of those points. I mean, rivalry atmosphere, cauldron of atmosphere. Trey Johnson, theoretically, I get that he's a lottery pick. theoretically, he should be one of the most rattled by that because actually, even though this team plays without their heads all the time, and I think that's maybe due to some of them as individuals, but I think a lot of this comes down to the fish rots from the head in terms of the organization and the coach. But Trey Johnson is a true freshman. He should theoretically be one of the most rattled in these types of moments. And sure, he's had his moments, but he was just giving out buckets on Wednesday night, and they still did not get a foothold in the game until really that, what was that run about the 8 minute mark? I mean, 32 minutes of that game, they didn't have much of a foothold in that game. And it wasn't South Carolina bad, but that was just very rough. I mean, you got Shedrick still trying to shoot threes. You got people can't hit a boat from water. I can't hit water from a boat. It's just very demoralizing, and it's the same old slow start, and that leads to those losses you're talking about, Seth, where it's like those games were for the taking, and those games are like, oh, if we could have just had one of those, maybe that bubble would be looking a little more favorable right now.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
went wrong. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Seth.
oh, yeah, no, you're good.
No, just a lot went wrong in that first half, and it seems like it is the same reoccurring issues, especially against bigger teams inside. Arkansas on the night had 31 free throw attempts. The Texas 13. Three of Texas starters, Pope, Shedrick, Kaluma, they're all in foul trouble. Doesn't hurt or doesn't help that Kaluma and Shedrick were two of those players, two of their bigs, and Zvonimir Visic, who's had history of success against Texas earlier in conference play. He did so again on Saturday night. Even without a Duthiero, who's arguably their best scorer in the paint. And another thing, if you're Texas, is Trey Johnson made 14 field goal attempts from the field. The rest of the team only made 16. And 7 of those 14 shots were 3 pointers from Johnson. Again, the rest of the team only made 2 3 pointers. And yes, if you look at the 3 point disparity from a percentage standpoint, it's vast. Arkansas shot over 50% from three. Texas did not. Texas shot 35% from three. But at the end of the day, they did make the same amount of threes. So that, in my opinion, is not the key difference in the game. I think it's mainly kind of the lack of help surrounding Trey Johnson and the same issues we've seen inside the key for Texas and specifically against this Arkansas team. They were just able to pound Texas in the paint and get to the line. And sorry, another small quick thing I need to say, but down the stretch, Texas kept switching those pick and rolls no matter who the player was. If Zvonimir Visic set a screen on Jordan Pope when John L. Davis got the ball, they'd switch it and Pope would be in the post against a Visic. I don't see how that's a recipe for success. Maybe I'm seeing things differently. Maybe they were just rattled and doing it in the moment, and there's a lack of communication because it is very loud in Fayetteville, especially when the horns come to play. But there were just some parts of this game that I did not understand, even though Texas came back down the stretch. But in overtime, we saw those issues that they had in the first half persist.
Yeah. And we talk about the slow starts. We're not calling for Rodney Terry to throw a chair across the court like Bobby Knight. Your team's just got to be able to get up because if you can't get up for a rivalry SEC game on the road while your tournament chances are on the line, then I don't know what you can get up for. I don't know. I don't know if it's some sort of mental block for them. I don't know if it's a coaching issue. I don't know if they just failed to really lock in for the first 15 minutes and play the way they know they can. I don't know if they need to start warming up 20 minutes earlier, but something's not working with these starts. And you see in this game, they were able to dig themselves out of the hole. But in other games, they don't even give themselves a chance. Before you knew it in the Georgia game, it was over.
Seth, sorry, real quick, you mentioned Ronnie Terry kind of showing some aggression. He actually did get it picked up a T, picked up the technical in the first half. Might have been a little bit too late. Texas down 9 with about 6 minutes left. But he did show some emotion there. Trey Johnson went over to console him, kind of calm him down. Great to see that leadership from the freshman. But Terry did pick up a tech, which is rare for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And building on my previous point, how is it the true freshman star, even when you look at these one and done Kentucky teams, and everybody would get on Coach Cal, oh, they didn't really uh, come through in the tournament time. Some did, some didn't. But really, there was always other experienced guys on those teams, and it's part of what made the Duke teams, even when Coach K adapted to the one and done system, part of what made these Duke teams so successful. Maybe some of the upperclassmen weren't as talented as the freshmen, but in a moment like that where you need a leader, it was not exclusively, might be sometimes, not exclusively a true freshman having to calm the head coach down. What about some of these guys who have been Terry's guys for a long time? What about some of these guys who have been with the program? I know there's a lot of new people. What about, I don't know, like any of these other people, Tremont Mark, Caden Shedrick, it's just the whole thing is troubling. And then it's like anything in life, you're gonna take literal, no, excuse me, metaphorical, hopefully not literal punches to the face. But I forget which boxer said it's about how you get back up. And this team is just it's almost like lethargic. Like it almost reminds me of like struggling to get out of bed in the morning. It's crazy, and they need like a jolt of espresso to get them going. It's and it's like set to your point. What can you get up for? Like, could they could they get up for a pickup game right now, like a fun pickup game? I don't know, and that's why I'm like these guys didn't forget to play basketball. There's something else at play here.
And you talk about the leadership. Look, Trey Johnson is, there's no doubt about it. He's the best player on the team. He's the most talented player on the team, but he's a freshman. And you see when you watch the game, he's the one getting in guys' face, getting in Rodney Terry's face after the technical, telling them to be smarter, just grab the ball or be physical. Now that's a testament to Trey Johnson and his maturity and his basketball acumen, but you shouldn't expect the freshman to be the one to do that. Now he's the best player, so a lot of times you will see the best player pick that role up. But you're seeing the senior leadership, and I know they've been in and out with injury and incapable to stay on the court for more than a few games at a time. But you should be seeing that from your upperclassmen. They've been through the wars, and there are a lot of transfers, so they haven't necessarily been a team together. But a lot of these guys have been through the wars of the Power Five basketball conferences. They know what it's like when it gets down into February, March, how tough it is to win at this level. You need more than one guy stepping up, and I know we keep saying it, and I'm tired of beating the dead horse here, but like somebody else has to step up both on the court in a consistent role and it seems vocally in a leadership role because to leave it on all in the arms of a 19-year-old true freshman is asking quite frankly too much, and Trey has stepped up and delivered every way imaginable, but it's unacceptable for him to burden that entire load.
And it's funny because I think Trey gets criticized a lot for showing that emotion on the court, and hopefully he does it by scouts and general managers at the NBA at the next level. But if I'm them, and I would tell them to watch as many Texas games as possible. Because as someone, I guess all three of us can speak to this, but as someone who's followed the team closely this year, has been at many games at the Mooney Center, has watched almost every Texas Longhorns basketball game, you can tell that he cares and that he shows emotion way more than the rest of his teammates do. And I'm not trying to knock the rest of the Texas men's basketball team because people show their emotions in different ways. I didn't really like to show how I felt on the basketball court and wasn't the most open. And you never see me complaining with the refs or getting in arguments with my teammates or coaches. But that being said, it's indicative of who he is as a player. You can see how talented he is. And I think a large part of that reason is because of how much he cares. And I hope that announcers, writers, any experts on basketball don't criticize Johnson for showing his emotions on the basketball court because it's something that this Texas team has needed all year long. And even though the teams fell short of expectations, I I've gained a lot of respect for Trey for doing what he's done on the basketball court, not just for Terry, but for his teammates. You see it when Jason Kent makes a big play, when Julian Larry makes a big play, when Big Z gets his third foul in the first half. He's heading to the sideline, head down. Trey's right there to console him. So there's a lot of good things I can say about Trey Johnson, and I hope that no matter how this season finishes, that the rest of his team can do whatever that it takes to help him um make a run in the SC tournament and hopefully March Madness if they make a run in the SC tournament. But unlikely that um they make the tournament after this loss to Georgia and Arkansas.
Yeah. And so they dropped the game Wednesday night in Fayetteville, a heartbreaker. And Saturday, the Georgia Bulldogs come to Austin for a game where we talked about these are two teams right there with each other on the bubble. We said if Texas had lost to Arkansas, which they did, they'd probably be looking like the second to last team in, maybe first team out. Georgia right in that same position. And boy, did the Horns, not only did they lose, they got steamrolled. They got punked. It was, I mean, we can get into this in a second, but one of the most shocking things I've ever seen, Trey Johnson commended him for everything he's done. He took one shot attempt in the second half, and it wasn't even technically an official shot attempt because he got fouled on it, so it doesn't count. And that was in the final 35 seconds of the game when he was fouled on a three. There are so many issues with this game. Somebody explain to me how your best player takes one shot in the second half of a game where you're down 20 plus, it felt like for most of the time.
I feel like despite the competitor that we all know him to be, at a certain point, when you feel like that you're pushing up against an immovable object and you feel like that in any concept, like sport, no sport, you're always better with a team and with people you know that I'm in a tough situation, I want to be in a foxhole with Will and Seth, and I felt like he just thought, it's over. I'm leaving. It's over. This game is probably over. We'll see what they do. I've, no reporting to back this up, but Seth, there is no other explanation. And it's not because they don't try to get him the ball, because as we know, this team, doesn't really run offensive sets and it's ISO ball and it's usually ISO Trey. Um, definitely probably the worst loss of the season, and definitely the most befuddling. We all thought, oh, they could squeak one out if they really need to, which they've done a few times at home. No, this team is in a free fall.
Yeah. We talked about the instinct. Like we had instincts that just Texas was going to win that game over Missouri. Just clearly not the better team, but they were going to win. We said the same. We both had that same feeling about this Georgia game. Couldn't have been further from the truth. The and here's why I agree with you. This is the worst loss of the year. Georgia as far as talent goes, it's pretty comparable to Texas, but they walked into your home court and just stomped all over you. Texas got smoked by Florida, lost by a worse margin at Florida, but Florida's a top five team in the country. Georgia's not. Georgia is a very even team to you. And yes, was Trayvon Mark out? Yes, Kendall Weaver still out. But again, they're not 20 something. They lost by 16, but if you saw that game, they're lucky to lose by only 16. That was an absolute boat race. Absolute boat racing by Georgia and Texas. It's just you when you come down to this part of the year and you need the wins just to pack it up and send it in like you just said. That's not only is that sad, but it's embarrassing. It's
Oh,
embarrassing.
and I just quickly I'd say that I think someone said that decent to good teams can have good games, but good programs have good seasons. Typically, to string consistency across a season, you need to have a good program. And the problem is, this team is so game to game. And when we do the Mississippi State preview later, for better or for worse, that's a good program. They're consistent, good coaching. They beat usually who they're supposed to beat. Maybe can't always punch above their weight, but they compete in a lot of games. Um, they just to get punked like that on your home floor, like I can only think of what coaches growing up would tell us, and we never made it to the collegiate level. It was just embarrassing, and I'd argue when we're coming into the season, guys, honestly, I know we all go to Texas. If we'd evaluated what Texas should have been on paper and what Georgia should have been, I think we would all have not way above, but we would have all said, "Oh, this Longhorns team is more talented than Georgia." And by the way, also we said, oh, what's going to happen? The midweek results. Will one of these teams lose to their rival midweek and be galvanized and pull off a win? And they only got worse. And Georgia beats Florida midweek. They should be in a look ahead spot. And they come out here and kick ass.
Yeah, and the funny thing to me is that according to Joe Lunardi's bracketology before the game, Georgia was one of the first four teams out of the tournament, and Texas was the last four in. And I saw this on College Game Day Saturday morning. Saw this before the game, the Texas Georgia game. Saw it at halftime of the game. ESPN showed it on the screen during their halftime show. And still, just no sense of urgency, it felt like. And I feel like it's different if a couple of shots aren't going your way, but this just did not feel like it was the case. And especially at home, packed environment. I was pumped up for this game, knew it was do or die for the Horns, and they just didn't show up. And again, didn't show up early when they needed to in the first half. And another thing for Texas is someone like, Damari Silas Jr., he had a career high 26. He averages 12.9 on the year. It was his season high. Yes, he has been hot of late. He's got 20 points in back-to-back games, 21 against Florida, over 20 points averaging in his last 6 games. But it's not like Silas Jr. was someone we were talking about going into the game on Saturday night. Yes, our podcast was recorded before Georgia played Florida, but still, it's these players that are coming in and having career nights against Texas, and that has to do something like that has to rub people the wrong way, and it doesn't seem like it has. And to come out and only make 10 field goals in the first half, to lose the turnover battle, to lose the rebounding battle, to lose the points in the paint battle, that's not a recipe for winning basketball games. And I think that's what happened on Saturday night. And can Texas turn things around? Yes. Will it work out in their favor? Probably not after this Georgia loss, because this is a team that was in the same exact bucket as Texas, had the same conference record, and now on Monday, Tuesday, start of this week, the bracketology discussion, especially in the SEC, is a completely different topic of conversation than it was last week.
Well, and think about it. This was such an inflection point for each team. Just like we'll get to the Oklahoma preview. That first game against Oklahoma was an inflection point for each team because each team was winless coming into SEC play. And now Georgia 2 wins this week. Boom, stock is booming. Texas 2 awful L's this past week. Bubble looks like it might have popped, and now you need an upset in Starkville and probably to look convincing against Oklahoma. I don't think squeaking by Oklahoma is going to do them all that much good. Obviously, better than a loss. And then they're going to have to win a game or two in Nashville. And short of Kaluma and Tremont Mark regaining some scoring prowess from their previous stops to complement Trey Johnson, um, I don't know where I see the buckets coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very valid question. And like you said, you look at the bubble. Uh, the game in Starkville is a must. The OU game is pretty every game now is a must. Like let's look at it the way it is. And the good news is for the Horns is they're playing good teams that will look good on the resume, but nobody that they can't beat. Because you look at these two teams, and I'm not saying they're going to win both these games or even any of these games, but winning at Mississippi State, that's a team that's basically going to find themselves somewhere between a 6 and an 8 seed. So it's not like you're going to Auburn. You got Oklahoma, a team that you already beat on the road. And then the first game of the SEC tournament, you never know what can happen out there, but it's very likely that Texas finds themselves in either the 11-14 or the 12-13 game of the SEC tournament, which would likely mean that Texas is either going to get another crack at Georgia or Arkansas. So another opportunity for a neutral quad one, maybe quad 2A win. And you keep stacking it and you hope you're lucky because the bubble is really weak this year. And so if you can pick up 3 wins, you're probably in the tournament. Now, having said that, we can get into the game here in Starkville. I'm not loving the odds just based on going on the road, playing a superior team, and nothing has given me the confidence to pick the Horns the way they've looked the last few weeks.
Yeah, we'll get into the game on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Central Time at Mississippi State. They'll be on the SEC network. This Mississippi State team, they're led by the undersized guard, Josh Hubbard. He's just listed at 5'10", guys. But he had 30 points against their win against LSU this past Saturday. He has over 1,000 career points in just 2 years in the program. And he's the engine that gets them going. Keyshawn Murphy, the forward, he's had a very good year as well, especially on the glass. But stopping Hubbard is going to be the key for Texas. And Devin Pryor, who moved in the starting lineup in place of Trayvon Mark, expect him to see the majority of the time on Hubbard, which, to be honest, Texas, to be honest, guys, I really like that matchup for the Horns. We'll see what happens on Saturday night, or sorry, Tuesday night. But I'm optimistic about that individual matchup. The rest of the game, especially on the road, not sure how I feel.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, no, in a way, I would disagree because I am somewhat sure how I feel. Devon Pryor is going to play hard. That's Devon, you've been my boy all season. He plays hard. He's long. He's only a sophomore. He's someone you can build a program with. Like that's the type of recruits whoever the coach is next year needs to be going for. Like it can't be the excuse can't be, oh, we've lost, the Weaver and Mark injuries. Oh, we've lost our two transfer guards. We're just completely out of luck. You should have freshmen and people within the program to replenish that. I do kind of like that matchup. Um, though he's gonna get obviously Hubbard's gonna get his buckets just at 30. Um, it's going to come down to size again. Is Shedrick and Kaluma, God bless, undersized, power forward, are they going to be able to rebound? Um, Keyshawn Murphy, as you mentioned, great on the boards. He's 6'10". Some of these rosters Texas has struggled to rebound against don't have a guy above 6'8" or 6'9" in the rotation. He's 6'10", 7.5 boards a game, almost 12 points a game, a steal, a block, 2 assists. He's not a three-point shooter, but they're gonna have to box him out. And then we can do all the prep we want, Will, to your earlier point. Who knows which Bulldog is going to go off for a season high 20 or 25? It's like taking players props when in the NBA when someone's playing the Wizards. My friends and I do it all the time. It'd be Seth, an example for you would be, over a base and a half against the White Sox. Sure. Why not? You never know who will step up against this team. So
Yeah. The one saving grace I do like for Texas in this game, well, two actually. One's all right. Let me just get into it. The first one, Texas is desperate. There is no other way to put it. If they don't win this game, you're not looking at an uphill battle. You're looking at climbing Everest here. This is not something that's probably going to happen if they can't get this one done. What does Mississippi State do a poor job of? I always look for this. What are the vulnerabilities of this team? They can't shoot threes. They can't defend threes. They play physical. They rebound. They attack, but they're really bad on both sides of the 3 point line, whether it's defending or scoring. What can Trey Johnson do? He got on the road in Arkansas. We saw him light it up. It seems like you get that kind of, not asking for 39 again, but if you can get a good scoring output from Trey Johnson, and for the love of God and all things holy, somebody else can step up and help him, you might just find yourself walking out of Starkville with a W. Now, will it happen? Probably not. We haven't really seen Texas show up with a fight, B, a second scoring option, or C, really any sort of defensive intensity for the first half. So unless if all those things happen the same way they've been going the last few weeks, Texas is probably going to find themselves staring at the bottom of the SEC, third to last in the SEC standings with a huge, huge climb to get to the tournament, having to do a lot of work in Nashville. But there are the keys right there in front of you. Shoot the three well, defend the three, and please just lock in at tip off. Just focus and play basketball.
Well, Seth, the only problem I would have is you talk about Mississippi State's inability to defend threes. I think they'll be able to do that, but against Trey Johnson, because the scouting report for them is probably do whatever
Right,
you can to shut him down. But the
right.
rest of the team just really has not been able to shoot the 3-pointer well. And I mean, I couldn't name the last game for Texas where they've shot over 40% from three. I mean, there's 34 on the season. Their free throw made attempts per game are at around seven. Trey Johnson probably has four of those per game. The rest of the team probably has three. Jordan Pope recently, it's interesting. I'm gonna get into Pope a little bit more when they play when we talk about Oklahoma because he's 27 when Texas beat Oklahoma in January. He had a great start to the SEC, great games against Oklahoma, Auburn, Tennessee. Even though those Auburn and Tennessee games were losses, they were both close, and Auburn and Tennessee are both two top five teams. He hasn't been able to get it going. Mark's been inconsistent. We even seen a big game from Arthur Kaluma as of late. So I'm a little bit worried if the game, yeah, I'm a little bit worried if the game plan for Texas is to shoot threes. Because yes, Mississippi State can't defend them, but I wouldn't necessarily say that is what Texas does well outside of Trey Johnson.
Right. You're right. And so we're just going to get into predictions here. Look, Chris Jans runs a great pro. He was great at New Mexico State, came over to Mississippi State and made the tournament in his first year, made it again the second year. And this is a program that's really hard to win at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Obviously, challenged as far as resources go, location when you look at the rest of the conference. Basketball history, they have one Final Four appearance, but for the most part, obviously a football school, baseball school. And so he's done a really remarkable job there in his short time in Starkville. Rodney Terry, as we know, we've talked about it till we're blue in the face. If he can't get it done, if he can't make the tournament, even if he does sneak in the tournament, he's likely not here next year. At least that's kind of the thought of the majority of people down here.
Hmm.
This is a desperate time for Texas. We've talked about this. But I think ultimately, we just haven't seen enough from other people outside of Trey Johnson. Yes, they've been banged up, but without a second score, without the defensive intensity, I don't see Texas walking into a top 25 team's house and beating them. And so for that reason, I do think they'll show some fight because they have to. But I think Mississippi State wins this ball game 81-72.
Um, so fun fact, they're heading to the hump. I know why everybody's confused when it says on the baseline the hump. I looked it up. It's because one of their old chancellors' last name was Humphrey, and it's the Humphrey Coliseum. So just to clear up that confusion. Will Texas get over the hump in order to begin their climb up the Bubble Mountain? I say no. They do not make it to base camp. If we're going to go to the Everest analogy, um, the Sherpa doesn't show up, as in another scorer besides Trey Johnson. I foresee visions of Trey Johnson forced into contested 31 footers. Um, I I'm gonna say though, right? I'm gonna say, despite not having seen it against Georgia, they will show some fight. Um, Ultimately, it will not be enough due to a lack of scoring. I'm gonna say lower scoring L, but not quite double figures. I do think it's interesting that, like you said, from three, the Bulldogs are 31.2%. I mean, you'd be disappointed at a decent high school team with that rate. So Texas does have about a 36% chance per ESPN analytics. I think that's hogwash, but I'll put a little bit stock in it. Um, 70 to 63, Mississippi State. Disappointing loss.
Guys, I really want to take Texas. I've been thinking about doing it for the last however long we've been going on this podcast, around 40 minutes. I'm like, I think Texas is gonna pull us out against Mississippi State, but from everything I saw last week, I don't know if there's anything I can say for me to say that they confidently that they are going to win on Wednesday night. And I think we'll know early. If Texas is in this game in the first 10 to 15 minutes or so, if they're hustling, fighting for loose balls, crashing the offensive glass, I think they could win this game. If that's not the case and they come out lackadaisical, similar to how they've been playing recently, lacking energy, not hitting their shots, not getting good looks offensively, they're going to lose this game. I'm thinking, though, it is going to be close, and Mississippi State will win 74-69. But I think it'll be a little bit different performance in the team's last regular season game at the Moody, last regular season game and last regular season home game at the Mooney Center on Saturday night, 7 p.m. against Oklahoma. Um, Longhorns, they have a 71.7% chance to win this game. They beat Oklahoma in Norman 77-73. Team obviously looked very different back then than how they look now. But that game against OU was also, we called it, I looked at our notes, we called it a must-win game. And if we called that a must-win game, this one is even more important. And Jordan Pope had 27 last time out against Oklahoma. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing if you're Texas, because I'm looking at it and saying it took 27 Jordan Pope points for the Longhorns to beat the Sooners, and I don't know if he's scoring 27 on Saturday night. That being said, I do like the Horns matchup against the Sooners, specifically because similar Texas, I think offensively they're one-dimensional. They play a lot through Jalen Moore and Jeremiah Fears, similar to how Texas plays through Johnson and Kaluma, and I think that plays into Texas' favor.
I
Well,
like
I
it.
mean, yeah, you got to say.
Again, okay. I assuming they come off the loss to Mississippi State, they're gonna be in a win three to even give ourselves a chance to make the tournament situation. It's senior night, the Moody Center. Now, the one team they have done well against the last few years is Oklahoma. Since we've arrived at school, Texas is 7-0 against Oklahoma in basketball. I think it's an 8 game or 9 game winning streak. They won one or two in a row before we got here. And they've succeeded. Porter Moser, props to that man. Former Loyola coach, taught me. I went to Loyola basketball camp, taught me how to take a charge, defensive slide. Always appreciate that. That'll come into play, I'm sure, as I get into my rec league adult years. But I digress.
That.
He's struggled a little bit too. I mean, I feel bad in a way, as much as you can for Oklahoma. He's been the first team out a couple times in his run there. You saw a big exodus of players, I believe, after his first year. It was tough. And he followed in the footsteps of Lon Kruger, who was great there, retired. And you've seen his team start this year really hot. And then once they got into SEC play, really struggled. And look, the SEC is a behemoth. It's really tough this year. They've lost some heartbreakers, but they've also gotten run out of the gym in a few games. And so they're in a similar spot to Texas. Now, don't forget the rivalry and the personal aspect of Porter not having beaten Texas yet. they're going to need that game just as much as Texas. We talked about in the Georgia game, and they have some of the Jimmies and the Joes to do it. I mean, Jeremiah Fears is an absolute beast. He's going to be, if not a lottery pick, a late first. And you got Jalen Moore, Duke Miles, Kobe Elvis, Sam Godwin, all been super productive for Oklahoma. Now they've been a little streaky, but they're all capable. And honestly, I like the depth of Oklahoma more than I like the depth of Texas.
I would say, given the rotational issues of we don't know what Mark's status will be, we assume the Energizer Bunny, Kendall Weaver, boy, do they miss him, will still be out. I think I might concede that to you that the Sooners are working with better depth, but in a way, like you mentioned, this is almost like looking in the mirror for Texas. Struggled immensely once they've been in conference play. Texas, since their blowout victory over LSU, has lost 6 of 7. Oklahoma, since an impressive victory, I believe, at Vanderbilt, have lost 7 of 8. Many, like you said, haven't been close. They've been run out of the gym a few times, like Texas. They've had consistency issues, like Texas. Um, you got to watch out for Moore and Fears, and then from three, though, they do shoot it a little bit better from Texas. Granted, like you said, they're streaky. Miles and Godin, each not main scorers, but they contribute, are each individually 44% and 45.5% from three, respectively. Texas is gonna have to run them off the line. I do think this is a winnable game. There's something to be said for the psychological edge of having beaten them. Granted, the players have changed over the years 7 straight times. Also, something to be said for senior night, the likes of Kaluma being celebrated. Um, but there's a potential for it to be as somber of an atmosphere as it can be for senior night if they lose in Starkville and they're a miracle away from being out. I could go either way on this game personally.
I guess let's say you guys have predictions.
Much like the BS that happened to the women's team with the number one seed of the SEC tournament, I think you could flip a coin for this one. I'd flip the coin if I had one right now. Um, I'll say the Horns just get it done on senior night, keep the streak alive. Students will be into it because it's Oklahoma. 74-71 Texas.
I like that score prediction. I agree too. I do ultimately think that Texas gets it done. Senior night home. Just they've had Oklahoma's number. Why stop now? Oklahoma's been scuffling lately. I'm gonna I got Texas winning 84-82 in overtime. I'm gonna quantify. I think I'm gonna qualify here with the overtime finish. I think we get a great game, and then Texas takes a little bit of momentum to Nashville because they're gonna
Uh,
need it.
I like that one, Seth. I'm gonna go high scoring as well. Texas 82, Oklahoma 79. I think it's gonna be close as well, but I think Texas is gonna pull ahead. And even though, by the way, Oklahoma's lost 7 of its last 8, they did have a tough loss at Ole Miss in Oxford this past Saturday. Sean Padula, he had to go ahead 3 to win the game for Chris Beard's Ole Miss Rebels. Um, Seth Hop, we got anything else tonight?
How about women's basketball losing the coin?
Yeah.
That was pretty brutal. Great season for Vic Schaefer's squad, 29-2 going to the SEC tournament, 2 seed because they lost the Greg Sankey coin flip to South Carolina. Vic Schaefer asked him what was he practicing flipping a coin for an hour. But Texas baseball winners of 9 in a row, won the Las Vegas Baseball Classic. Like we talked about, man, there's excellence all over campus, just not when the men's team plays at the Moody Center.
Softball keeps winning. Yeah, like you said. And no, and especially with baseball, I get it. Coach Sloss was given a lot of resources and I'm sure a certain degree of patience, and he's probably feeling as little pressure as possible that can come with having the head baseball job at Texas. But 9 in a row, would be 10-0 had the bullpen not blown the first game against Louisville at Globe Life. They put up at least 10 runs in every game this weekend in Vegas. The Texas Tech catcher said, "Oh, we failed if we don't run rule Texas." They almost got run ruled themselves. The Horns are up 9-1. It just goes to show you that it's sometimes it's just a coach away, and you can see this in many different countries and in many different sports.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of success for other Texas sports teams. It's also cool seeing a great weekend of college basketball. We saw Namari Burnett buzzer beater against Rutgers. We saw Tennessee hit a buzzer beater in their comeback win over Alabama. And then Ryan, you talked about that Michigan State buzzer beater versus Maryland. It's been quite the week in college basketball. Hopefully, the Horns can follow it up this week, and get two key victories heading into the SC tournament. Thank you all for tuning in to the Bevo Buckets podcast on the Burn Orange Sports Network. Again, Will Iger here with Ryan Hopper and Seth Berger signing off. Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Burn Orange SN and our individual Twitter pages at Ryan_Hopper31, at SethBerger02, and at Will_Iger. And please subscribe to our YouTube page. Thank you guys all for joining and have a good one.